Okay, so lesson 34. When we have something like this equation right here, I hope that we all know what that looks like. It should just be a line. So it will look like a line. And that's because if we were to graph it, I should have put a graph here, but I didn't. We know that the 3 is the y-intercept. So I'm up 1, 2, 3. So I have a point here. And then this 2 is the slope. So up 1, 2, and over 1, up 1, 2, and over 1. So something like this. Okay, so we know that that's a line. That's because this is a linear equation. It's the equation of a line. We know that the standard form of the equation of a line is y equals mx plus b. So today we're going to get into 2 other shapes that you can graph on a coordinate plane that we haven't done before. So the basic equation of a circle is x squared plus y squared equals r squared. This is where r is the radius of the circle. We're going to get into this in a minute, but a more exact equation is this over here, where you might actually have numbers that are squared with the x. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so if I tell you that this is the equation of a circle and r is the radius of the circle, then if I ask you to graph this, what do we know that r, oh, I messed up. Okay, sorry, this should be 49. Change that, probably still wrong on your sheets. So, okay, so if this is the equation of the circle, if r squared equals 49, then we know that r must be, you can use a chat box or you can unmute yourself and tell me what you think.
Good answer, Andrew.
Well, let's go back. If r squared is 49, you can just solve that as an equation in your head, or you can write it down. If
Wait,
r squared equals...
It would be 7 then, right?
Right, Cole. Yeah, so we just take the square root of both sides. Technically, it could be plus or minus 7, but in this case, we want a positive number, so it's 7. Okay, so then r must be 7. And then I'm going to tell you the center of this circle is at 0, 0. So the center is right here at the origin, and we only want to graph the circle. So I do usually put a little dot at the center, but that's not actually part of my graph. Like this one, when I have 2 dots, I connect them. Okay, so it's just kind of a placeholder for me. If I know that the radius is 7, I go from the center in all directions 7. So I'm going to go up here, and I know that I'm going to have one at 7. I'm going to go out this way and have it at 7. If you're really good, you could go out this way, but since I don't know exactly where that is and it's somewhere between the grids, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go the 4 ways around. So I went top, I went right, I'm going to go bottom, which I think is this one, and then left, this one. So now that I have 4 points, I'm going to connect them in a circle. Now this is where your drawing skills will come in handy, but we all know how mine are, so, you know. Okay, so this would be how you would graph this circle. The center is right here, and the radius is 7. So if I had drawn a really good circle, then we could have measured from the center out to this side, which still also be 7. But generally, we're just going to go from the circle, and we're going to go along the straight lines, so it's easier to find those points, and then we just connect those points with the best circle that you can muster. Okay, so hopefully that's like the easy start. Now we're going to learn how we might do it if we're not given everything like here. I gave you that the center was here. Okay, we can graph an equation just by putting numbers in for x and solving for y. I always call this an XY chart. Some people call it maybe a T chart. On the computer, when I typed up your notes, I was not very good, but like usually I would draw it like this on my paper. I just don't know how to get that line to appear in Word, and I didn't feel like looking for it, so sorry. Okay, So I have picked out some x numbers that I think will work well. And so we're going to put them into the equation here and find out what our y is. And then these are all points that will be graphed on this equation. Just like when we have a line, well, let me see. I'll go back to that first one. If I have this line here, I can make an XY chart for this line. We did that way back at the beginning of the year when we started these. So if I put in 1 for X, what will I get for Y? I would put a 1 in right here. And so I'll just solve it up here. So Y would be equal to 2 times 1 plus 3. So 2 times 1 is 2, plus 3 is 5. So I know that if I plug in 1 for X, I'm going to get 5 for Y. Okay, so we know how these work if we've done it before with a line. Now we're going to do it with our circle equation. Okay, so I'm going to plug in 2 and I'm going to see what I get. I'm going to do it over here on this side just so I'm not messing up my pretty chart over there. So I'm going to plug in 2 for X, sorry. So 2 for X minus 1, and then I'll square that, and I will have Y minus 3 squared equals 9. And we're probably jumping a little bit. It's been a while since we've done some of these kind of algebra equations, but we can do it. 2 minus 1 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So I have 1 plus Y minus 3 squared equals 9. I could factor this out like we've been doing, but then it'll get a little confusing. So that's not how I want to solve this. I'm going to move this 1 over. So I have Y minus 3 squared is equal to 9 minus 1 is 8. Oh, I totally messed this up. Well, it's because I tried to do an example that wasn't in our book. That's okay. It'll somewhat work. All right, so if I don't know how I did this wrong. Oh well, keep going. So here I have something squared. To get rid of this square, I'm going to take the square root. So I'm going to take the square root of this and the square root of this. This is where I messed up. This should have been an even number, but I didn't do it right. Okay, so when I take the square root of this, it's Y minus 3. I don't want to say that I really messed up. I mean, this is possible. It's just, it wasn't the even numbers that I was expecting us to be working with. So, I mean, anyway. So the square root of 8, we will just be rounding it. It's about 2.8. And remember, when I take a square root, it's actually plus or minus. Okay, so we're going to work with just the positive one, and then we'll work with the negative one in just a second. Okay, so if I have the positive one, I want Y by itself, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Okay, so even though it came out a really messy decimal because I misjudged myself, we can still do this. I just want you to know it's possible. We're working with it, so it's not crazy. 2.8 plus 3, so Y is equal to 5.8. It was supposed to be an even number, but you know. Okay. What if I had taken the negative side? So here I have another 2. That's because I want to take like the negative side of this. So if I had, same thing right here is when I take that square root, I can do plus or minus. I have to do plus or minus because if I squared a negative 2.8, it would still be 8. So if I take that negative 2.8 and then this step I add this 3, then I get what, 0.2, 0.2. So then this is my other answer for 2. So sometimes you'll have 2 answers. Sometimes it'll come out exactly 0, and then you'll only have 1 answer. Okay. You can call out, type in the chat box. Hopefully this is making a little bit of sense. We're just plugging in a number for our X and then solving for Y. The tricky part would be right here. You have to take the square root of this to get it by itself. And when you do that, this other number can be a positive or a negative. Okay, I'm gonna have to erase it so I have enough room to keep going. Well, this is gonna take forever. Okay, we'll just get it good enough so I can do the next one. Okay, so now I'm gonna plug in -1. So, oh man. Let's change it to a +1. Okay, fix Miss Berry's mistakes. Make this a +1 that we're gonna plug in. Okay, so +1 minus 1 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 9. So here, 1 minus 1 is going to give me 0. 0 squared is still 0. So I have 0 plus y minus 3 squared equals 9. See, this is what's supposed to happen. Then when you take the square root of this and the square root of this one, we have that y minus 3 is equal to either a positive or a negative. Square root of 9 is 3. So we'll do it with both. We can have a +3 or we can have a -3. That's just this right here. To get the y by itself, I'm going to add 3. I know it's the same number, but don't get confused. So both of these, I'm going to add 3. This one is going to give me 6, and this one is going to give me 0. So I'm even going to change this right here because I totally messed up. Okay, so now we've done 1. One answer will be 6, and one of my answers will be 0. Okay, now we're going to try it with this, though it's not going to come out pretty, but we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to plot these points. I have 1, 0, and I have 1, 6. And then I have 2 and a tiny number and 2 and 5.8. Yeah, it did not work out at all because you can't tell where the center is. 3, give me just a second. Okay, so we need to plug in 4. And we need to plug in -2. Okay, sorry guys. Your book has them much better, so you won't have to be super confused like this. Okay, let's plug in 4. So if we put 4 right here for our x, we have 4 minus 1 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 9. 4 minus 1 is going to be 3. 3 squared is 9. So now if we subtract 9, we get y minus 3 squared is equal to 0. You take the square root of it, so y minus 3 is equal to 0. That means we add the 3, and we would get y is equal to 3. So right here, if we put in 4, there's not 2 answers, there's only 1, because the square root of 0 is neither positive or negative, it's just 0. So when we plug in 4, we get 3, and then we're going to plug in -2. All right, nobody's crying that they're lost yet, and I know I made this really ugly, but we're going to get through this. Whoops. Okay, so now I'm going to plug in -2. So -2 minus 1 squared, y minus 3 squared is equal to 9. So -2 minus 1 is -3. When I square -3, it's the same as if I was squaring +3. The negatives cancel each other out, so it becomes 9. So I have 9 plus y minus 3 squared equals 9. I subtract this. I have y minus 3 squared equals 0. I still take the square root, but the square root of 0 is 0. Y minus 3, so then I add the 3, and I get y is equal to 3. That's what we needed. Okay, So now I can plot these last 2 points. If I go out 4 and I go up 3 and I go out -2, I would also go up 1, 3. So now we see what our circle looks like, right? So I think now you can hopefully see, if you draw this really nicely on your paper, that the center is right here. So we can see that our center is at 1, 3. Our center is at +1 for x and +3 for y.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you technically, would you like put the 5.8, but like on the other side to make it perfect?
Yeah, you can. It would be if you plugged in 0. So if you plug in 0 for x, you will also get 5.8 and 0.2. So
Okay.
yes, you could, if you plugged in 0 for x. So your book is not going to give you these ugly ones. They're going to give you plug in 1 and 4 and -2. I got messed up.
Okay.
So yeah, so the problems in your homework, I don't think you'll be getting decimal answers, because it will tell you what numbers to plug in. This is kind of like, the way that they do this lesson is, it's not the full extent of it. You'll learn it again in Algebra 2, how to graph the equation of a circle. So this part right here, this star, I think it's good. It will make your homework easier if you can see this, but you don't have to know it, because I believe your homework will give you enough points, whereas as long as you can do this part where you plug in the x values that they give you, then you'll be able to graph them that way. But I think it's important to learn the standard equation of a circle, like I set up above, was this kind of crazy part. Well, now we can compare that with the one that I gave you up here. So let me just write it down below and see if it makes sense. It was x minus 1 squared, y minus 3 squared is equal to 9. So let's kind of connect these parts. The x's are the same because those are the variables in the equation, so you'll never see them as numbers. Your h is going to line up with the 1, and then your k is going to line up with a 3. Now, in the standard equation, you have minus signs. So if you have minus signs, you just take the number. And then r lines up with 9. And we set up above, r is our radius. If r squared is 9, then our radius is 3, because we're just taking the square root of 9. We lined up the h with a 1 and the k with a 3. So the center is at h comma k. So that's a point that you can pull out of your equation of a circle, and you can plot the center at 1, 3. So if I didn't want to plug in any of these, and I could line up my equations well and understand where the h and the k come from, and that my radius is 3, I could plot it just like I did the one above. I plot 1, 3, and then I go out 3 in all directions, and I'm able to draw those spots and connect my circle. So I feel like this is helpful. You'll see a lot more equations that are going to be like this, where they have like h, k, and a and l, and it will stand for different things, and how you adjust the graph based on those numbers. So kind of get used to this. You'll see this a lot more in Algebra 2 for different graphing shapes. Anyway, I hope that's not too confusing, but I think it's good to know. And you see how we pulled out the h and the k. So now let's do an example where maybe we just use that equation and see if we can graph this without the XY chart. So I can see that my h is going to be 2 because I have x minus 2. So I know that my h is going to be 2. And then I'm going to skip over here. My r squared is 4. So if I take the square root of both of these, my r is 2. Now here, my k is a little bit confusing because I have y plus 1, but I need it to be y minus k. So imagine that I took the y plus 1 and turned it into y minus a negative 1. Do we see how that is the same thing? If I subtract a negative, I'm also adding a positive. So I'm going to make, so now I have it as y minus k. So my k is negative 1. And remember that my center is at HK. So my center is at 2, negative 1. Essentially, I'm just going to take whatever numbers in here and switch the sign for my k and my h. But I wanted you to see why I do it that way. So here's my center, and my radius is 2. So now I can graph, and I just go over 2 and down to negative 1. There's my center, and I'm going to go 2 in all directions. And now I can graph my circle. Hey, that one looks better. Okay, questions over circles, because we have one more part. No questions?
I don't know what to ask.
Hopefully, your homework will kind of lead you through step by step, and this will make a little more sense. But just keep these notes with you, and then I'll post this video again, so if you need to, you can come back and look at it. I'm hoping that once you do it once or twice, you'll kind of see what the book is going for, what we're supposed to be doing. All right? It seems like way out there. We've never done something like this, but I think you guys are very smart, and I know you can do it. But the book will step you through a little bit more in your homework, so hopefully that will help. Okay, now we're going to do something called an ellipse. I know, I don't know why they threw this all together in these last 2 lessons, but yeah, they did. So, okay, an ellipse is a stretched or an elongated circle. It's also like an oval. Okay, so it's going to look, instead of a perfect circle, it's going to look more like this or more like this. So they can go up and down, or they can go sideways. They can be really long and flat, or they can just be a little bit different than a circle. So we can have, well, a lot of jelly beans. It's a good Easter lesson, right? They look like eggs or jelly beans. The coefficients of the variables in the equation of ellipse are not equal. Okay, so look right here. This 9 is not the same as the 4 in front of the x and the y squared. Okay, so those are the coefficients in front of x and y, and they're not the same number. In our circles, they were all 1, but they could have been different, like 9x squared plus 9y squared equals 36. This one, they're the same coefficient, so this is the graph of a circle, because this 9 and this 9 are the same. If we wanted it to look like what we had up above, we would divide everything by 9 all the way across. This can be divided by 9 and is 4. And then this would just be y squared and x squared. And now we have that same coefficient of a 1 in front of those. So those are the same coefficients still. This and this equation are the same. But anyway, so in a circle, those coefficients are the same. Usually they're 1. Usually we don't see them. But this would still be a circle because they both have a 9 in front of them. But in an ellipse, they don't have the same number. So in our equation of an ellipse, we have a 9 in front of the x squared and a 4 in front of the y squared. So we're going to graph this with our XY chart. And I think I pulled this one out of the book, so it should work. Okay, so let's plug in 0 for x. So we have 9 times 0 squared plus 4y squared is equal to 36. This just is all 0, so it doesn't matter. This we have 4y squared equals 36, so I'm going to divide by 4. I'll have y squared by itself, and then 36 divided by 4 is 9. And then to get y, I take the square root. So y is equal to, now when I'm solving for equations, I do take plus or minus. So because it's a square root, it's either a positive or a negative 3. So over here, that's why I have 2 zeros, because one time I can get a positive 3, and then another way of doing it would be a negative 3. Now I'm going to plug in 2. So I have 9 times positive 2 squared plus 4y squared equals 36. Let's see, 9 times 2 squared is 4. So 9 times 4 is 36, plus 4y squared equals 36. So if I subtract this to the other side, I'm going to get that 4y squared is equal to 0. I would go through and divide by 4. It's still y squared equals 0. And if I take the square root, y is equal to 0. If you can see right here, 4y squared equals 0 means that y is 0, that's fine. But if you need to take these extra steps to get rid of all the numbers to prove it to yourself, that's okay too. So when we plugged in 2 for x, we got y is 0. And because it was 0, there's not going to be another 1 on the other side. The square root of 0 is both plus and minus 0, but it's the same thing. So the last one I'm going to do, I'm going to have to move over here, is I'm going to plug in negative 2. So 9 negative 2 squared plus 4y squared equals 36. Negative 2 squared is still 4. So this is 9 times 4 is 36 plus 4y squared equals 36. Hopefully you see that this is the same as over here. So the answer will also be y equals 0. Now we plot these points over here. So if x is 0, y is, uh-oh, we're running out of time. Oh, we're almost done. Okay, so y is 3. If x is 0, y can be negative 3. If x is positive 2, y will be 0. If x is negative 2, y will be 0. So when you plot all of these, you can see what is exactly in the middle. So between these two is this, and between these two is right here. So this is our center, but then and then we're going to connect the points. Because we knew that it was an ellipse, we know that we're not trying to make a perfect circle, but we are trying to make it look like an oval. So as you connect them, make them look like a better oval than this, but an oval nonetheless. And this is our center. Okay, I believe all the ones in your homework, the ellipses are actually centered at 0, 0. So when we see an equation of an ellipse, it should look like this. This ax squared plus by squared equals c, and a and b are different numbers from each other. But I will tell you that the formal standard equation is going to look like this, where h and k are the center of the ellipse, just like hk is the center in the equation of a circle. I don't think any of your homework looks like this, but I just want you to know that we can center an ellipse somewhere else. We just add numbers inside those parentheses that we square. And a and b are still different numbers from each other, because if a and b were the same, then this would be a circle. The best thing to do when you're graphing these is to make the XY chart and try numbers that work out well. If you start to get fractions or square roots, like Mrs. Berry did because she didn't understand what she was doing up above, just put a different x in and try again. Or you can estimate those decimal square roots and plot the point anyway, but it will not be as helpful in helping you find the center. So you want points that you're graphing to be on, you know, an exact number, and then you can kind of count right in between to find the center. Okay, this is it for the lesson since we've gone through all the notes. I'm happy to answer more questions. But I think you guys just need to try the homework. And then I'll be back on tomorrow evening. And so if you're struggling with it, come back on tomorrow evening and let me know what you need help with.